We think we know this plant. We see it as medicine or recreation. But this simple stone altar, nearly 3,000 years old, proves that we are only reading the last page of a very old story. What if I told you that for most of history, this plant wasn't about escaping reality, but connecting with it more deeply? That it was a sacred key used by our ancestors to unlock the divine? How did so many ancient cultures, continents apart, all discover this power? The search for that answer begins and will end with the secret burned onto the top of this stone. By the time our journey brings us back here, its silence will change everything you thought you knew.
The seeds of divinity. Our story begins here, nearly 10,000 feet up in the windswept Pamir Mountains. In 2019, archaeologists uncovered a 2,500-year-old cemetery, and inside, they found something that changes everything we thought we knew about the origins of cannabis use. They found ancient wooden bowls, or braziers, filled with stones that had been burned. When scientists analyzed the chemical residue left on them, they got a shock. It wasn't just any plant. It was cannabis, with a chemical signature showing it was incredibly high in THC. This wasn't the hemp people grew for clothes or rope. This was a strain specifically chosen for its power to alter the mind. Think about what this means. This wasn't an accident. This was a deliberate act. These ancient people were creating a thick, psychoactive smoke, not for recreation, but as a core part of their most sacred rituals, saying goodbye to their dead. They believed this sacred smoke was a bridge, a way to communicate with the spirit world, and perhaps to guide the souls of their loved ones on their final journey. And this wasn't an isolated ritual. Thousands of miles away, in ancient India, a similar reverence was taking root. The sacred texts, known as the Vedas, written as far back as 1500 BCE, name cannabis as one of 5 sacred plants. They call it a source of happiness, a joy giver, a liberator. Here it wasn't smoke that carried the spirit, but a drink, a milky, spiced beverage called bhang, consumed during festivals to honor the god Shiva. They believed it cleansed the body of sin and helped them connect with the divine. It wasn't about escaping reality, it was about diving deeper into it. So you have 2 ancient cultures, separated by mountains and centuries, one burning cannabis to speak with the dead, the other drinking it to celebrate the gods. They didn't have the science, but they clearly understood the plant's power. The question is, how did this sacred knowledge begin to travel?
The nomads of the spirit world. So how does a sacred idea, a ritual, travel thousands of miles across the ancient world, long before the internet or even highways? The answer comes from a people who were always on the move, the Scythians. Fierce nomadic warriors who thundered across the grasslands of Central Asia on horseback. And for a long time, all we knew of their spiritual lives came from a single, almost unbelievable account. The Greek historian Herodotus wrote about them over 2,000 years ago. He described what happened after a Scythian funeral. He said they would build small felt tents, crawl inside, and throw cannabis seeds onto red-hot stones. He wrote that a vapor would rise, thicker than any Greek steam bath, and the Scythians would howl with pleasure. Now, you might think that just sounds like a wild traveler's tale, an outsider trying to describe a strange culture. For centuries, that's all it was. But then we started digging. In the frozen tombs of the Siberian steppes, archaeologists found them. Not just the seeds, but ornate gold-trimmed censers, small tents and braziers, exactly like the ones Herodotus described. The artifacts proved the stories were true. This wasn't a legend. It was a ritual.
a purification ceremony to cleanse themselves with sacred smoke after being near the dead. Think about that. It's the same sacred smoke we saw in China, used to connect with the spirits of the departed, but the Scythians put that ritual on wheels. They turned it into a tradition that could travel with them wherever they roamed. They weren't just fierce warriors, they were spiritual traders. And as they moved, they carried this powerful knowledge with them, planting the seeds of a sacred tradition across continents. So, what happened when this nomadic ritual finally found a permanent home on a holy altar?
An offering to the divine. We've seen the sacred smoke used in shamanic funerals in China and in purification rites by Scythian nomads. But for many, that's where the story should end, in the distant pagan world. But what if I told you this same plant found its way to the very heart of one of the world's most influential religions? Our journey now takes us to the desert of ancient Judah, to the ruins of a 2,700-year-old fortress called Tel Arad. Inside its walls, archaeologists found a shrine, a perfect model of the biblical temple in Jerusalem, a holy of holies. And at its entrance stood 2 limestone altars. For decades, their purpose was a mystery. Then, just recently, scientists decided to analyze the dark, burned residue on top of them. On the larger altar, they found what they expected: frankincense, a famous biblical incense. But on the smaller altar, they found something that sent shockwaves through the worlds of archaeology and religion. They found cannabis. And not just traces of it. It was a concentrated cake of high THC cannabis mixed with animal dung to help it burn slowly, just like incense. This wasn't an accident. This was a deliberate, holy offering. Let that sink in. This wasn't a nomadic tent in the grasslands. This was a formal, organized place of worship in the kingdom of Judah. The same sacred smoke reaching back to the mountains of ancient China was now rising from an altar as a direct offering to God. It challenges everything we've been taught to assume about ancient worship. It forces us to ask an even bigger question. If this was happening in a state-sanctioned shrine on the road to Jerusalem, what other secrets have we lost to time? If this plant could be a holy offering to connect with the divine, what else did they believe it could do for the human body and the human soul?
The healer and the visionary. So, we have a plant used in funerals, in purification rites, and as a holy offering on an altar. But this is where the story gets even more personal, because our ancestors didn't draw a clear line between the spirit and the body. To heal one, you had to tend to the other. And nowhere was this more true than in ancient Egypt. For years, archaeologists found cannabis pollen inside Egyptian tombs, a familiar echo of the funerary rites we saw in China and with the Scythians. But here, it was also tied to goddesses of everyday life. Goddesses like Seshat, the symbol of wisdom and knowledge, and Bastet, the fierce protector against evil spirits and disease. Ancient medical texts, like the Ebers Papyrus, one of the oldest medical documents in the world, list cannabis as an ingredient. They used it to treat inflammation, to soothe anxiety, and to ease the pain of childbirth. Think about that. The same plant that could open a connection to the gods was also used to bring comfort to a mother bringing a new life into the world. And this idea wasn't unique to Egypt. The ancient Greeks, the fathers of modern medicine, used it to dress the wounds of their horses and to treat human ailments. But they too noted its other power. Its ability to create a state of euphoria, a feeling of joy and well-being, which they sometimes used in their own religious ceremonies. This is the key. Was it medicine for the body or medicine for the soul? The answer for them was simple. Yes, they didn't see a difference. The plant's ability to quiet the mind, to release a person from anxiety, was a powerful form of healing. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? As we now run clinical trials and debate the therapeutic benefits of cannabis for anxiety, pain, and PTSD, are we discovering something new? Or are we just finally catching up to a holistic wisdom our ancestors understood thousands of years ago?
Reconnecting with the sacred herb. So let's take a step back. We've traveled from a 2,500-year-old tomb in China to the nomadic tents of the Scythian warriors. We've stood before a holy limestone altar in ancient Israel and walked the temples of Egypt. And in every single place, we found the same plant being used in the same profound way, as a bridge to something sacred. They burned it in wooden braziers and golden censers to create a sacred smoke. They drank it as bang to honor their gods, who called it a joy giver. They offered it on altars to the divine and used it to heal the body and soothe the soul. For a long time, we've looked at all these separate facts as historical curiosities, but that's because we were asking the wrong question. We were asking what they were doing. The real question is why? The answer is that these ancient cultures didn't see cannabis as a drug. They saw it as a tool. There's a modern word for substances used in this way, Entheogen. It comes from the Greek, and it means that which generates the divine from within. That's the thread. That's what connects the shaman in the Pamir Mountains to the priest at Arad. They believed this plant could quiet the noise of the outside world long enough for them to hear a different voice, the voice of the spirits, the gods, or the deepest parts of themselves. It was a technology of consciousness. And this ancient tradition is not entirely lost. When you see Rastafarians using cannabis as a sacrament to commune with Jah, they are part of a continuous story that is thousands of years old. They are preserving a sacred connection our modern world has almost completely forgotten. We began by asking why our ancestors revered this plant. We've seen them use its smoke to communicate with the dead in China, drink it to honor the gods in India, and burn it as a holy offering in ancient Israel. The answer seems to be that they didn't just see a plant, they saw a key to unlocking a deeper level of existence.
We started our journey here with the silent riddle of this scorched limestone altar. We asked how so many cultures could discover the same power in the same plant. The answer we found is that it wasn't an accident. They were all searching for a key, and this was it. Not a drug, but a technology of the soul. That is the paradigm shift. The story of this plant isn't about getting high. It's about getting closer to the divine. If any doubt remains, look at this. A golden vessel found in the tomb of a Scythian king, made for one sacred purpose. This isn't just history, it's a forgotten wisdom, a reminder that the search for meaning is written into our DNA. It makes you wonder what other sacred technologies we've left behind. So the question is no longer about the plant itself. The real question is, what doors, once opened, have we forgotten how to find? If this is the kind of journey you want to be on, subscribe and join us as we complete the circle on more of history's lost stories. Until we return to the beginning with new eyes.